Well, hello and welcome to the vlog. It is June 1st at the time I'm filming this, and we are going to vlog the experience of reading the semifinals round of the Booktube prize. People voted, and this is what the majority chose. If you are not familiar with the Booktube prize, it is a yearly prize put on by Robert from Barter Hordes, and it accumulates a large number of books that are the best in fiction and nonfiction, and invites anyone who's involved with Booktube, both people who have their own channels, people who are commenters, anyone who's active with Booktube, to join in and volunteer to judge. So I have skipped out on the octofinals and quarterfinals round, so those have completed as of today. I already watched the first part of the eliminations, basically, from the quarterfinals. So I've seen the results of what was knocked out. I have not, however, watched what the group assignments are. I've been waiting on my email telling me what group I am in order to look at what books are going to be in the groups. So we're going to find out. I do know Robert already sent out an email saying that they're kind of shorter on nonfiction judges, and I am signed up for either fiction or nonfiction, so I'm assuming I'm going to get nonfiction, which I'm not mad about. I will happily read them. So I guess this is the beginning. Let's dive in and see what I've got. Okay, very exciting. I kind of expected I was going to get nonfiction, so I'm in nonfiction section A, so let's go see what in the world that group has.
Now let's look at the semifinal pairings.
Oh wow, okay. This is maybe a heavy group, but I'm really excited about this. Okay, so these, I pretty much am excited about the three on this side, on the left side. Fourth Time We Drown, The Song of the Cell, and Eating to Extinction. Those ones I've heard about and at least have some idea what they're about, and am really excited to read them. The other three, I really have not paid as much attention to, so I kind of have no idea what they're about. I think The Face Maker was about somebody who, like, I'm sure it says, but I can't read it right now. This was people from war that were disfigured, that they were able to use plastic surgery, I guess. I'm assuming, but we will very quickly see when I get into these. So now I've got to go do some research on my library website and find out which of these are available, if I've got to buy any of them, but I am super excited to dive into these. I'm not actually quite awake yet, but I've taken care of my most important job of feeding the cats. And so it is June 2nd. We're going to start reading. You will hopefully have seen me go get library books. Weirdly, my library has all the books. That is fantastic news, in system at least. And I think 2 of the books are available on audio, so I may or may not turn to audio for those. 4 of the books were available from my branch, supposedly. I couldn't find the regular edition of Song of the Cell. It's got the large print. That's a pro tip. If you are trying to find a new release that is all checked out or has a million holds, check for large print, because very often the holds list is much shorter. So this one they just had on the shelf. And Half American, it said was on the shelf, but it definitely was not. So that's fine. I was able to get 3 books. So I'm good to start, and I am going to start with Song of the Cell by Siddhartha Mukherjee. So we're going to get to reading. So cool. These are animalcules. All right. We read about 10%. So that's good. Cats are monitoring. Yeah, so I think I need to go work out, take a shower, do some errands, and then I will kind of update you with my thoughts in a bit. Look what I found at PetSmart. Very nice little laser pointer with a pride theme. So cute. Ooh, look. Oh my goodness, it's a red dot. Oh no. What is happening? Hey, there you go. It's over here. Behind you. There you go. I can't pass up that deal, so I grabbed 3 books from the grocery store at 3 for $10 to toss in a little free library. So this is Little Bird, Timo the Adventurer. That one looks super cute. I'm definitely going to want to read that. And I Believe in Bunnycorns. All right, I'm considerably more awake and lively now. Read about 10%, the first little bit, of Song of the Cell by Siddhartha Mukherjee, and I'm liking it so far. I'm not a super scientifically literate person, and I haven't really had any problems with that so far, which is always great going into science nonfiction. So good points on that. There are a few references to things that I have sort of a nebulous idea of what the thing is that's being talked about, not a good understanding, and that has not proven any barriers so far. The first 2 kind of sections I really like because I can sense the author's enthusiasm, and I would say leading in, the very first chapter is very much about cancer. And so we know that his first book was The Emperor of All Melodies, and is all about cancer. And this, I think, did turn me on to being interested in reading that. So good notes on that. I feel like his enthusiasm comes across so much, not just for the treatment process, like the different methodologies and the discoveries that we've had about how to treat that and why they work in the way they do, but also for the actual cancer itself and how incredible it is that it works the way it does, why it behaves the way that it does. And not knowing basically anything about either of those things was really fascinating for me. So it was a great tone to start off the book from. So I think that's kind of where I'm at, where chapter 2 was much more focused on what an actual cell is, moving kind of away from the cancer topic into more historical topics, like the early use of microscopes to see these things. And I don't really have a ton to talk about from that chapter because it's a lot of historical figures and their excitement as well. So this is again about the wonder of the discoveries that they were having about these microscopic entities. These sort of animalcules come up. I love that. One of the funniest things in the chapter is the guy who's really first discovering these living things through a microscope. Of course, he had to look at his sperm, naturally. I mean, of course. But on top of that, it mentions that he also compared his to someone with gonorrhea. So my brain was like off thinking about the process of him going to find this person to get their sperm, like someone with an STD specifically, so he can check out their sperm. So silly, so weird. Of course, that's what early scientists did. So very interesting and little funny anecdotes, I guess, like that throughout that make it have a lot of flavor to this and be very accessible. So yeah, I think I'm liking it so far, and we will carry on. I'm going to, I think, read some other stuff for now because we're still very early into my reading journey for Booktube Prize. Saturday morning, I just got up. Thought I would give a tour of my Saturday reading. Get up usually a little earlier than this, so I slept in a little bit. Gotta feed cats, gotta make coffee, and then we read. As you can see, everyone inhaled their breakfast and they're done now. So I've got coffee. I just grabbed this candle for a little self-care, and this is Coastal Wind and Lavender. I was looking for specifically a summery candle, and this one is kind of summery. So the lavender is really light, almost a vanilla-y, very, very soft lavender, not quite the perfumey lavender you get. And I'm guessing the Coastal Wind part is this sort of soapy smell. I really like it though. It's very mild. I don't like the very strong, perfumey smelling ones. And it's got a wood burning wick. Yeah, nice cozy reading time. All right, so we are in the cozy reading nook now. The candle's lit. So now we got to pick out our book we're going to start with. So I've got my pile next to me as usual. The pile next to me is quite a lot. I have not read any more of my Booktube Prize book that this vlog is for. So I will definitely be reading some more of that. But I'd like to start with something light, so I think I want to start with A Slice of Mars. It's completely sunny and pouring rain. Gumbo decided to fall asleep just in the middle of the floor, probably because cat. I think they're keeping an eye on the candle. Everyone wants to kind of stay in eyesight of it. Alright, it's been about an hour. Obviously, everything takes longer when you're filming, so only maybe 40 minutes of that was reading. And I read about 35 pages in A Slice of Mars, so now it's time to pick our next book, and yeah, I think I'm going to dive into our Booktube prize book. We need to make some headway on that one today. Okay, so it's a couple minutes after 10, so it's been another hour. I don't always do this, but obviously I do like hourly. Another 30 pages in this, but this is large print, so that's actually half. So about 15 pages of this and about 30 pages of the previous book. So I read for 2 hours, basically, and have read about 45 pages total. This one is fairly dense, but still. So when people always talk about how much booktubers have to read, and have to read fast and whatnot, I'm not a very fast reader, and that's okay. So right now, like I said, it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go hop on to the elliptical and do my Duolingo Japanese lesson for 20-30 minutes, shower, and then get some food. My morning is now wrapped up mostly. It's a little after 11, maybe 11:30, and we're winding down. Let's talk about the chapter I read in Song of the Cell. And I'm not going to like wrap up every single chapter, I think, as I go along, like I have been. This is kind of front loading the vlog, but I think I will read a good chunk before I check in next. So this particular chapter was focused on discoveries surrounding like the microbes, germ theory, hand washing, sterilization, antibiotics, that sort of thing. And so this was mainly focused on the history of that and sort of the specifics in terms of timeline that was interesting, but it didn't feel like really new information. The years, some of the names were new to me, but all of this like broad strokes were things I sort of knew already. And so that was a little less engaging. I think what was really engaging here was the personal stories that he's telling from his life, the author. And so that's, I think, was an okay balance. I do wish there had been a little bit more. Maybe it could have been broken up into separate chapters with half his information and half the history that tied into that. But that's not how it laid out. So we will see once I get a bigger chunk read. So yeah, as I said, that was pretty much my normal morning. I think like a normal Saturday, if I don't have anything to do, I will pretty much do that through most of the day, where I'm just picking up books on my stack throughout the day, reading, taking little breaks to get up and go do random chores. However, today I do have D&D, so I'm gonna go do my chores for maybe an hour, and then get stuff ready. Like I've got to dry my hair and all that stuff. Get ready and go to D&D. So I will check in maybe tonight if I read some more, but maybe not. Maybe I'll check in tomorrow. I'm back. I wrapped up D&D a little earlier than I expected, so got home and read for about an hour or two. I did read one essay from Letters to a Young Muslim, and then I mostly chipped away at this one. So, thoughts on this. I feel like we're only a couple days in, but my enthusiasm definitely started up here, and it's been like a steady decline, and now it's off the cliff. I am not totally like disappointed with this at all, but I'm not loving it. I was really into it at first, and reading on, I'm now at page 188, which is about 90 to 100 pages in the regular edition probably, and I noticed reading this last chunk, like there's whole paragraphs where I would be like, okay, I just completely glazed through that paragraph. I need to go back and reread it because it's so much dense history and science that I feel like the balance is really off here. It feels like it should be, like 3 parts anecdotes and patient cases, and then 1 part each of science and history to contextualize that. And instead, we're getting, 2 parts history, 2 parts science, 1 part anecdotes. So I feel the balance is really off here. This would probably be appealing if you are a very sciencey reader, because it is pretty dense into those aspects. But I also feel like if you are that person, you already know all of this probably. So I am getting stuff I don't know, but it's pretty dry. So that's, I think, where we're at. Yeah, and I'm done for the day. It's winding down Saturday. We'll read some more tomorrow. I'm not sure if I will read more of this because I did make pretty good progress today. But yeah, so wrapping up Saturday, I've got to go do some video editing and then off to bed. So that is my day. We are going to the lake to watch the rowing club race. I think they're practicing for the dragon boat races that are upcoming. I'm not going to go to that because I have been before and it's always absolutely crazy down there. Like, you cannot get parking. There's so many people. So we're going to just go watch them do the prep races and have a nice day outside. So we're making a summer salad to enjoy. An entire chapter explaining the phases of cell division. Rue really likes to assure I can't get stuff done. Oh, really good stretch. Yeah, that's nice. Thank you. What? Very coconutty. A little bit of rum aftertaste. That is very, very good. I had planned to lay down and read for a while, and someone wedged their way in here. A lovely Saturday morning, reading outside on the blanket. A little humid, but that's not bad. It's cool enough that it's okay. Rue likes to be prepared to sprint back in if he can immediately. This is how you hunt a red dot. You sacrifice your body in its path. Wait for it to come to you, I think. Artificial or medically assisted human reproduction or in vitro fertilization. Blah. The word artificial seems odd here. Isn't all of medicine artificial? Should we call the use of antibiotics to treat pneumonia artificial immunity? Or the delivery of a baby the artificial externalization of a fetus? So, I'll use medically assisted reproduction, even though artificial reproduction is the more commonplace term. Footnote. Where we go to more, what am I referring to here? It's just a very long, lengthy footnote. Who needed this? Nobody needed him to specify why he doesn't like artificial insemination or clarify other than maybe a sentence about it. Did we really need several sentences and a lengthy footnote? No. No one needed it. As always, we've got adorable cat feets hanging out there. So I just finished doing my journal, sort of media entertainment journal. And because you all like boring things, I thought I would share that with you. This is my weekly journal, sort of, this is my level of a bullet journal sort of thing. So you can see I do like books or reading things are circles and squares are things I watched. So like I did a collection with a short story and then anything in a box is things that I finished. And so I write those down every day, and what I just did is the monthly layout. So copied my finishes to the monthly layout so I can keep track of that. And I'm very messy. I have really sloppy handwriting. So I can't always read what I've written, but usually I can make some sense of it. So that's what I do for entertainment tracking. The last clip I actually filmed, I don't think I'm going to throw in here, in fact, because I had just finished the chapter on IVF in section 2, and there were some things that made me react very strongly to that chapter, and I think coming out of the chapters following that, I'm better able to portray why that was such a problem for me. Really, so section 2 is all about human manipulation of cells, things like IVF and embryonic gene editing. So coming out of the IVF chapter, there was a very significant amount of what came across borderline bias in that the author, Mukherjee, is sort of talking in very hyperbolic ways about reproduction in a way that really unsettled me and didn't quite sit right. Like, to the point I was feeling like he was going to start going off into sort of woo-woo nonsense, really. Like, very close to crossing a line into weird stuff. But then, over the course of the chapter, he is talking about the sort of history of IVF and the people involved, and talking through that topic means also discussing a number of the progressions toward it being very unethical. And through the entire chapter, I feel like he was siding with the progress of IVF, not because of the wonder of it or the scientific sort of progress to it, but because he was just for reproduction so heavily that he wants to see it play out. That feels like, obviously, me reading into things a lot. But coming out of that into the next chapter, which is on embryonic gene editing, we see very similar things where there is also some very unethical behavior. Similar ways, it's a lot of keeping secrets, not going through the right procedures, trying to sort of skate by on things. And in that chapter, it's completely portrayed as negative at every turn. And almost like hand waved away that there could be any justification for doing those things, which put up against the previous chapter on IVF is just a complete 180. So I felt like I lost a little faith in the author on that, because of how that was portrayed, and like totally different framing from very similar circumstances as far as I'm concerned. Maybe there was something that didn't get across to me about the difference in the two circumstances, but like from a scientific standpoint, I feel like the choices being made were pretty similar. So yeah, I don't know, it certainly made me really have problems with that little section. And section 2 is really engaging with the topic of medical ethics quite a bit. And so while I was actively struggling with wanting to read from the author during those couple chapters, the actual book did become much more engaging than it had been, because I had talked about how sciencey it was. And once he gets into the human aspects, the people doing the science and their justifications behind these things, it got a lot more interesting. It helped as well that I think I had listened to a podcast, I believe it was the Ologies podcast, where they had a medical ethics expert on who worked in ethics for a hospital. And so having had that background of understanding a little bit of the topic of medical ethics and the complexities of that really enriched the reading experience here, because that was such a major topic through section 2. So I don't know, I became much more engaged in reading, but was very annoyed with the portrayal of the information in this section. So we will see. I am still just under halfway through, so I've got a ways to go, hopefully. We'll be making some more progress this weekend. Are your bird friends trying to move into the door? No, they're trying to move in. You trying to peek around at them? What? The birds are making a massive disaster here. They're pretty mad at me. This wine was not very good, but it was cheap from Aldi, so we're going to just use it as a mixer. And we got some spruce tip hop tea, which is just a seltzer tea with hops to it. With a little bubblies and spruce. And then I absolutely had to grab this at the store, pomegranate plum juice. I'm not a big juice drinker, but that is an unusual combo and exactly the sort of thing that I like. So I've been really enjoying that. So combining these together has a very nice, like earthy, a little bit maybe heavier drink. It's not a light, fresh drink, but I really like that kind of stronger taste to it in terms of the flavors, having that spruce and pomegranate and plum. So yeah, that's my nice little drink for tonight. Another bedtime, nighttime vlog. I made myself continue reading until I got through section 3 of the Song of the Cell, which is blood. It was a little slow to start. We got into the types of blood, some very basic stuff, but it did get going. Jumped into discoveries surrounding blood typing and blood transfusions and the weird things people did historically to discover that was very interesting. I love that sort of old-time nonsense that they tried, the trial and error. So I thought that was really interesting. It was also very interesting to learn how quickly transfusion was adapted to, mainly because of World War II. Something that was came to mind immediately when that came up was the dog tags. Blood type was a key piece of information on dog tags, but that was relatively new science, new medicine that had just been discovered relatively few years before. And with how slow information traveled, I would not have expected that to be adopted and implemented by governments and military so quickly, but clearly it was. So I wish we had gotten that piece, maybe the bureaucracy, I guess, of how that happened, because it would be so connected to everything about this chapter. So yeah, I wish that piece had been there, but what was there about transfusion and blood typing was really, really interesting. Then we kind of moved into more illnesses and discovery of antibodies and inoculation, and it started with smallpox, but I think I kind of am going to come back to that. So the section ended more with HIV/AIDS, and every section has had sort of a centerpiece illness that it's focusing on, and so I definitely thought that was going to be HIV/AIDS, and it was going to really start to get built out, and we were going to kind of dig in right there. And the book did not. So HIV/AIDS, it felt like, was very skimmed over and not really humanized at all, oddly. So every section has, and every illness really other than that, has had a very human face put to it, and this did not. It had two patient cases brought up. The first one was oddly not humanized because it was very rapid, and I guess spoiler for this 2-page patient case. You're reading, and this guy is coming in. It's basically just a sort of diagnostics session, very rapidly skimmed over. Talking through how this patient has come in with mysterious symptoms that don't all quite fit. They do turn out to be HIV/AIDS, of course, but he has none of the risk factors whatsoever. And so what I think Mukherjee is trying to get across is how stigmas to talking openly do make diagnostics difficult. But instead of actually getting that across, he kind of just goes, well, we never figured out what was wrong or why he got this disease, right? We never like pinpointed the root cause of this. However, he just kind of hand waves away, and so we never get that moment of clarity, really. And it's so frustrating because like this is a compulsively readable case, and you're wanting to get to the end to find out how did he get this. It's so mysterious, and then you just don't get it. So I don't know. And the second patient case was just not humanized at all because it's only focused on the illness and the diagnostics and the treatment, all of that, nothing about how the patient is affected or what they're going through at all. So which was odd. I know throughout this, cancer patients have come up, including in this section, where they are much more built out as a person, as an individual. And obviously that is Mukherjee's kind of specialty. Like he has a whole book on that topic. So clearly I'm aware that he's more attached, I guess, to patients that are going through cancer. But yeah, it felt very odd. So I guess jumping back then, I think the actual centerpiece for this was inoculation and smallpox specifically. So we talked through the milkmaid story and the cultural knowledge surrounding that. I feel like we got some really interesting history about all of that, and how it was sort of cultural knowledge that pre-existed the milkmaid story, which the milkmaid story, if you aren't aware, is this old wives' tale, I guess, that went around where milkmaids never got smallpox because they had cowpox, and that was of course the case, and how they have like milky skin with no pox, whether hundreds of years before that, though, Chinese healers were diluting smallpox in order to inoculate people for it, and then they passed that on to Indian healers as well. And so that was totally new information to me. So I think I did take away a lot of information from this section. So it was a little slow to start, a little mixed about this, but overall, I think this was a good section for me. Rue and I are having a productive Saturday morning. It is June 17th, I think. We're going into the Juneteenth weekend. It's a long weekend for me. I have had a very, very productive morning. As I said, I read already some this morning, did my Japanese lesson, worked out, listened to some audiobook while I did that, and got showered and cleaned up, and now we're ready to tuck into Song of the South some more, and I'm over halfway, and there's a big section of notes, so that's very good. However, I'm aware quite a bit that we are now a quarter of the way through the Booktube Prize, 2 months for this round, and I'm not even finished with one book. So this is the most dense book, I think, or I can project that this is very likely the most dense book in my grouping. The other ones seem to have more of a narrative, versus this one is really focused on the science. So I'm not as worried about that as I, could be. I think I can get some significant progress on this weekend. But if I don't, then I am going to start getting worried. I'm probably going to need to get to the end of this or near the end. Otherwise, I will have to start giving up fun reading a bit, and I don't really want to do that. So we're going to really put a priority on this one this weekend, getting it done and moving along. That is it. Messy closet has been cleaned out and rearranged. This had no space left in it, so thankfully we've got a little bit of space now. This is gifts and holiday stuff, so a little bit of pet stuff and random storage, so glad we got it cleaned up. Well, hello, I am back, and it is June 18th. I think I talked to you all yesterday, but I haven't talked to you since I finished section 3, and there are 6 sections, and I've now finished my first Booktube Prize book, The Song of the Cell. So I finished all 6 sections. Section 4 was Pandemic. It felt a little out of place because it was just like a tiny short chapter rather than a full section, but that led into the next section of organs, and there was a little bit of a natural flow there because the previous section was blood, and then coronavirus, and then heart as the first organ. So that sort of had a natural flow. But the organ section, even more than any other section, lost me a bit on the tie-ins to the cell. There would be occasional like drop-in mentions of here's a specific cell thing that is going on with this organ, or cell therapies that we're learning about, or here's some history about how people investigated the cells of this organ. But most of it, and this happened earlier in the book as well, there were large chunks, like even 30 or 50 pages, where I was just like, what am I supposed to be taking away about the cell from this thing he's talking about, and just didn't get the answers to that. So I don't know, that feels like a miss. Like maybe we needed some editing there, or a little more focusing of the content, perhaps. So kind of uneven. And these are like immediate thoughts. I literally just finished this, so I have not cohered my thoughts at all. The section after the organs was kind of wrapping up and looking to the future and cell therapies that we may have in the future and kind of emerging science. And weirdly, worth noting, he totally, spoilers, never let me go at the end, and I was not expecting that, but yeah, he just casually spoilers it. So that last section also, there's no wind down really. I was getting to the last page and it just kind of stops. There's not a summary. There's an epilogue that is still talking about kind of where we're going in the future, but like it just abruptly stops. So that was a little odd. I feel that the ending, or the very beginning and the very ending, are the strengths of this book, because his passion shows through. He's so enthusiastic about the topics at the beginning and the end, and at the end he has drawn back around to the topic of cancer quite a bit. His focus for the book should have shifted much more to that than it is in this work. So I think that would have improved this for me. Saying all of that, I think I'm making it sound more like this is a negative, but this was a very good book. From my perspective as sort of a non-scientifically literate person, I didn't struggle to understand anything in this book. It was very understandable, even the points that are incredibly, incredibly dense. So this was a good book. I think it was negatively impacted by the conditions that I'm reading under, that I had to read this in a time frame, a very short time frame for the Booktube Prize. If I had been reading this like a chapter a week, or maybe even 2 chapters a week, it would have probably had less of a negative effect dealing with the dense content, and I could have enjoyed it a little bit more maybe. But I rarely read books like that anyway, so I don't know. But I think this would be a great like science text for someone, for a class even, to work through. This has that level of explanation from the very ground up. It has the density of content to it, and it even has diagrams, like the scientific diagrams of the cells. So I think this would be good for a pure science learner who wants to pick that up. But I don't know who, as a casual reader, this is for. I don't see a casual reader really picking this up. And anyone who's a real science nerd is probably going to already know all of this stuff. And I feel like that's more the target audience of this. So they would be going for like more the case studies and the patient situations, but those are not, they're in the middle of really dense science. So you'd have to read through or slog through a lot of stuff you already know if you're a very scientific reader. So I think that's where I'm at on this one. It's a very good book, very well written, I think, but I'm not sure who the book is for, and I had a little bit of a negative reading experience because of the timeline that I was on to read through it and the density of the content. I do think it was a little uneven and unfocused as well. But I think that's where we're at. I am going to, I believe, even though I really need to jump into some more Booktube Prize stuff, I'm gonna give myself a break a little bit, and even though I have yet another pile of books. I'm going to read Several People Are Typing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is the 19th, and I have it off as a holiday because this is going to be a very quick, I think, read as a sort of reward for getting through the dense stuff because it's told entirely in Slack messages, so there's hardly any text. So I think, and it's due back at library. I have to get it done, otherwise I've got to just return it unread, but I really would like to read it. So I think I'm going to read this tomorrow morning and then dive into my next Booktube Prize book. So I will see you again tomorrow. So June 19th, as suggested, I read Several People Are Typing this morning. It was way quicker than I expected even. I read it in about 2 hours. And then went to the park, did some exercise, walk, be outside, and listen to Ocean's Echo. And I'm all hot and sweaty now, gross, so we're cooling down and making some lunch. And once have had lunch and showered, I'm going to read some Booktube Prize next. So I thought I would have at least an hour or two to do chores and whatnot around the house, but someone was needing lap times, so we settled on Paradise Falls for my next book. So Booktube Prize, book number 2. So intense first couple pages. I think this book would be perfect for a try-it chapter because this has a great hook that absolutely will make you want to keep reading to find out what is going on. Are you taking evasive maneuvers? We've got an egg! I got up for a minute and my spot was stolen. I guess Rue is gonna judge the Booktube Prize this time. So weirdly hazy. It's 8 o'clock at night. For some reason it's not foggy, it's just hazy everywhere. Here is our map of air quality that I would look it up after being outside. We are way down here. So the Canadian wildfires definitely are impacting the air quality here. That's the haze that's out there. Not nearly as bad as north of me, but holy moly. Editing me here, you are about to see a snake. If you don't want to see a snake, skip ahead to the end of snake marker. Otherwise, you will see a snake in this video. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, I just walked past that guy. Scary, scary. Little snaky, I don't want you to come in my house. Oh my goodness, that was the most ridiculous situation. So the snake started climbing my wall, so I went out in my big rubber boots and an umbrella to chase it away. I don't know what kind of snake it was. I'm assuming it was not anything terrible, but I definitely don't want it climbing around by my door. And Rue was like yelling, wanting to go outside the whole time while I'm trying to like squeeze out the door and get it away. I'm sure it's trying to get the egg, and I really don't want it to get the egg. Our snake friend is still hanging out next to my porch, which I don't appreciate. So apparently salt works to scare them away, or to keep them off. So I've covered my porch in salt. Well. We meet again. I'm a little bummed this evening, unfortunately. Things kind of went very sideways for some people, not directly impacting me or anything, like, so nothing to worry about with me. Other than I obviously care about them, but it meant I did not get to go to the Martha Wells event I had been looking forward to for a couple months, and I was hoping to take you all along, so I didn't get to go. It was a pretty long drive. I would have had to leave early, and that just was not in the cards. So I was halfway like excited for my backup plan, because when I went to Ghibli Fest at the theater a couple weeks ago, I noticed Lonely Castle in the Mirror was showing, which I have not seen, and that is a book to movie adaptation. And that was conflicting with this event. So I was like, that is a little later, and it's a very short drive from me. So I was like, I can make it. If I leave on time, we can do it. And did not get to leave on time because it was just me, and if stuff comes up, it's just me. Yeah, so neither of my plans worked out, so a little bit of a disappointment. But that is a positive for you and me and the Booktube prize, Paradise Falls. I read some more of this, and I'm about 75 pages. So it's a couple days later than when I checked in last and had started this, and I had only read a little bit. So got some good reading in today, and I'm really liking the writing. It's not flowery or anything. It's very descriptive, and I love the minor details. So I don't remember how much I shared about this from the first little bit I had read, but we are investigating this situation where there was sort of a development that got canceled in the late 40s. No, not late 40s, in the early 40s. And then a chemical plant started dumping there. Well, with sort of natural suburban growth and expansion around Niagara Falls, eventually they did get around to developing it and just built a bunch of homes and school and playground over top of this chemical dumping site. And then people started getting really sick. And so there are some really strong scenes at the beginning about that. And then it kind of jumps back and gives us that story of the chemical plant and the sort of failed development there and everything. But we are being introduced to this through the eyes of some very sympathetic characters. We start out with a mother, we've got a congressional aide, so we've got a political angle there. We've got the small town Gazette journalist that is clearly going to be investigating this. And I think a scientist so far that I've been introduced to on this. And all of these are very sympathetic characters that are clearly going to be fighting for this cause of cleaning up this chemical dumping site and real advocates against this. Meanwhile, in the background, we're getting kind of mustache-twirlingly evil chemical corporations, and the local politicians, oddly enough, seem very in favor of the chemical plant because they're bringing jobs, they're bringing money and whatnot, but the regional politicians seem to be more in favor of getting this taken a serious look at. That was not good grammar, sorry. So there's sort of a political conflict at different levels being set up there, and the more regional level politicians clearly are trying to find the foothold where they can actually get into this, and not being able to find the money or the sort of political and scientific resources to go after this as quickly as they want to. And time is just sliding by, and we're seeing these families not having any information about what's going on, not aware that they're living in active danger, even as people are getting increasingly sick. So it's really horrifying and also compulsively readable. So yeah, this has been very good so far. Big contrast to my previous book, I think, in that this is really page turning. So I think that's it for my disappointing night. I have to actually go take a quick shower and wind down for bed, I think, now.
Eradicated in the late 19th century, especially the plains, the prairie, where
I have not made a ton of progress on Paradise Falls from last time I checked in, but I was reading along, and we're getting into the late 70s. People are really getting sick and starting to raise a fuss about what's going on. And I had a political epiphany. So not getting into political commentary or anything, but this seems like it's the perfect book to challenge or introspect with a libertarian, perhaps. I know libertarians, and don't take any issue with libertarian. It's certainly a different ideology than me, and I find it fascinating the way that our brains process information differently that lead us toward different political ideologies. And so I can see and understand that they're prioritizing different things than I would. And there are a couple, there are lots of different veins of libertarian. So I'm kind of talking broad swaths. I would say the major camps of libertarian, one is sort of absolutist, that they think that freedom trumps everything and we should not sort of do anything to protect people's lives or well-being, and everyone should just be unregulated, no protections, you protect yourself, sort of thing, right? The other camp is maybe a little bit more balanced, I would say, but are very anti-regulation and do hold the ideology that if markets were more free and unregulated, they would be self-correcting, and consumers would have the ability to derive quality and ethical ethical production by companies, right? And this is a great case for completely shutting that down, right? Because in this book, we're getting into the late 1970s now, where I'm at, and people are starting to really get sick. People are starting to raise a fuss about that. And where we're at so far, I mean, I'm sure it's going to turn around and it's going to result in regulations, but in the 40s, when this all really started, there wasn't any sort of regulation for the company that was doing the dumping about how they would do that. So no regulations there keeping them from doing that. The developers who developed and built suburban neighborhoods over that, again, no regulations to keep them from doing that. They didn't have to disclose that to the people who then moved into those homes. So then, we get down to the consumer level, and very strong libertarian ideology is about consumers being their own advocates, right? And making informed choices. And here, to start with, we have people who are not even able to be their own advocates. And I think the book does a great job of sort of showing why someone might not be able to. If we get beyond that, where these people are not able to advocate for themselves, where they are advocating for themselves, but maybe they don't have the information, often it's because the people who have the information are literally just keeping them in the dark and not sharing the information about what's going on. Beyond that, people that are able to get the information and advocate for themselves are dismissed because they aren't experts or specialists in any way. And once we overcome everything, people are able to advocate for themselves. They know what they're talking about. They are able to get their foot in the door to actually get into the ears of someone who has power to do something. They're again dismissed as not being worth upsetting things or changing things because it's working the way it is. Effectively, it's profitable. It's not impacting a huge amount of people, right? It's impacting this one tiny little community, and they're just not worth it. And so I feel like that shuts down a lot of the arguments that you hear about the sort of idealistic vision of an unregulated market. And we see it play out here really in a lot of detail what that would be like. And so I think this is a very interesting book from that purely like a political ideology perspective. So fascinating stuff. And indeed, we have 3 eggs today. So the birds came back despite the snake and laid eggs. It is a Sunday morning, the 25th of June, I think. So I just got back from the pool, and I tried to get up there early because I like to try and swim kind of laps. It's a private neighborhood pool. It's big, but it's not like Olympic size or anything. It's big enough if it's empty to swim around the outside and get in some good swimming, but unfortunately there were too many people. So I went and kind of splashed around a little bit, laid out, splashed around a little bit, laid out. So it's very hot. So I'm actually cooling off back from the pool with a nice little sun pop. Very tasty. And I wanted to read off a little section that I read showing kind of just the insidiousness that I was talking about before. We're just continuing in a further downward spiral. So for context here, the chemical company that's involved in all of this is Hooker Chemical. So that's referenced here. There are multiple other chemical companies that are brought up that had similar things going on around this time, but Hooker Chemical is the one that is the focus of this specific story. And Davis, that's referenced, is someone who is working for them. Davis said, "We are sure as hell concerned about the people out there." He wanted the folks in the neighborhood to know that Hooker was doing everything it could to help. The company was offering $280,000 for any remediation plans, even though it wasn't legally obligated to do so. It was working closely with authorities whenever possible, and it was agreeing to be open and candid about the past. "We believe," Davis said, "we have been a responsible corporate citizen." What Davis failed to mention was that the state investigators at that very moment were probing 3 other sites in the city of Niagara Falls where the company had dumped toxic waste in recent years. One of those sites was small and near the Hooker plant downtown. The second wasn't far from Lois Gibbs's house at 102nd Street and the river, and it was so volatile that 2 neighborhood boys had been injured there in 1970 as the ground began to smoke beneath the soles of their sneakers, popping, one of the boys said, like a shotgun. And the third site, called Hyde Park on the other side of town, was potentially the worst of them all. The Hyde Park dump was about the size of Love Canal, but held as much as 4 times the amount of waste, including some 38,000 discarded drums, according to internal Hooker records. These drums contained everything from pesticides to misc other flame retardants to unknown. Davis also typically failed to mention one other thing, that Hooker had yet to give the authorities a detailed accounting of every chemical in the canal. Hooker was working on it, open and candid, considering every side of the square. But it was going to take a little longer, which maybe wasn't such a terrible thing. In one interview, Davis said he was hoping that emotionalism would die down and reason would finally have a chance to once again prevail in Niagara Falls. Yeah, so they're hoping that, time will pass and sentiment will die down, people will be less angry at them before they actually share the information. And yeah, so they haven't shared what chemicals are there for anyone to know how bad it truly is. Scary. So as usual, I'm pretty anti-corporate already, and this is definitely not helping that. So yeah, I think I'm gonna pause this now that I'm back in chilling out, read my TLS, and then read some more of this. So I've got my very wrinkly TLS. They've been coming a couple weeks behind, so this is the early June edition. And I'm now getting them about once a week, but they're behind, rather than before I was getting them like 2 or 3 all at one go, once a month or so. Which doesn't matter. They're not too overly time sensitive. So we've got Elaine Showalter vindicating Mary Wollstonecraft. That should be really interesting. Richard Vinnan, France on Trial. Andrew Motion, new poem, finds at Bert and Agnes. And John Banville, In Search of Yeats. I would like to read that one. And this is Aung San Suu Kyi, I think. I don't want to show you my address. Yeah, Requiem for a Dream. Aung San Suu Kyi, Fall from Grace. So, will be interesting. Doing more closet cleaning today. So these are shirts that I previously did a cull and move shirts that don't fit, but I wanted to keep here. So in my delusional mind, I was thinking I would be back into those very soon, and that has not happened. So I think they need to get stored away to make room on this shelf to move my sweaters. So we've got all the sweaters here that obviously are seasonal, so I'm not wearing them right now, but they're going to come back in a couple months. So I think they're going to go up there. Maybe some of my skirts on the other side of the closet has skirts and dresses and stuff that I am not wearing. So yeah, so that is the project for this afternoon. Among the thousands of habitable planets, speculator return for millions of time. So now I've got sweaters all folded up there. We've got short sleeve sweaters and long sleeve t-shirts here. And then button-ups there. And then kind of my more accessible side, continued button-ups, short sleeve button-ups, short sleeve tees, skirt, pants, and much more space. Booktube is a very time-consuming hobby. So I just spent 2.5 hours between filming, editing, getting together covers and text that I wanted to add to the video. Yeah, 2.5 hours on that. And that's not reading time, obviously. So my mid-year book freakout tag is almost ready to go. I have to watch it through one more time and then we'll be finished. But that is all for just a 16.5-minute video. You all are so worth it, though. This is so frustrating. He told Gibbs, this is a scientist, he told Gibbs that her work was a waste of time and energy, useless housewife data. Still, the women made progress. So frustrating. As I was reading earlier in the book, I was wondering how we had gotten such sort of specific things about days they were doing certain things and that coincided with other people. And now as we've gone along, it's become clear that some of the mothers in this community were really the ones organizing grassroots efforts and and pushing this problem forward. And for those mothers at key points, they started taking very specific data about what was happening in their lives, what was happening with their children, how people in their family were feeling at certain times. And so they did have very specific records. They start going door to door and collecting information about the symptoms and what other people in their community have gone through, their medical histories, whoever would disclose that information, and just the general experiences of these families and their communities. And yet nobody wants to listen to that. No one in power. There is a couple of other sympathetic individuals who have the knowledge, the expertise, doctor and a scientist, that can kind of affirm the information that they're gathering, but no one with power will listen. And they're just being dismissed as these housewives, and yet they're collecting all this data that I can tell is going to be a major linchpin in sort of breaking this case, or in collecting the data that shows how bad it truly is. Ripley, where are you going? Buddy, where are you going? Such a laundry helper. Just making some sesame, garlic, mushroom, broccoli stir-fry-ish with random stuff because I needed to use my shiitake mushrooms before they go bad. So we'll have some dinner and then read some more, making great progress. It is about 9:15 on the 26th of June. Ignore my greasy hair. It's very gross and sweaty here, and I need to go take a shower, but I wanted to update you before I went down. So I'm about 300 pages in. I've been reading since I finished up work, and so I'm making good progress. I think I can finish tomorrow probably. I've got a little over 50 pages left. And I did not know, but this book is kind of getting toward or heading into the EPA. It was a fairly new organization at that time, so they had been popping up here and there, but it wasn't really clear what their role was nationally. They hadn't totally solidified, and this seems to be a prominent case where people started to understand their role nationally. As well, this talks about Carter starting to push forward the idea of superfunding, or putting together the superfund. And so I'm aware of that as a concept, but I had no idea the background of it. So this is very much getting into the national level now as we've progressed toward this back half of the book. And many of the people from the neighborhood, the people that have been involved in advocating for themselves, are now going to speak to Congress and pushing forward getting help at the national level because of the severity of the issue. So that's been really fascinating. And seeing a young Al Gore get involved, and he became this very vocal figure at certain points so far from what we've seen. And that's pretty interesting. I had no idea he was involved in any of this, and was very much someone who stepped in to push it at the national level. So something else I'm noticing about the book and the writing specifically is that as we move toward this national level, the things that were happening before, where items were being really dismissed and the concerns of the people were really dismissed, the author was handling it very even-handedly, I think, and not leaning into like being salacious or dramatic, like no over dramatizing, even though you easily could with this stuff. He's letting these things sort of speak for themselves in terms of the people who are negative about it, where early on, they were very much dismissing things out of hand because of a lack of evidence, or saying, let's just wait until we have more information, that sort of thing. And those people are increasingly becoming more adversarial, and they are adversarial even in the face of mountains of evidence. And he let himself be objective and let them show themselves early on, and kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt in what they were saying as being potentially genuine. And when I say he, I mean the author. And now they're increasingly getting sort of angry and verbally backlashing at the things that the people who are trying to get help are doing. And so now they're coming off much more increasingly unhinged. And I think that was a really effective thing to do here, because, as I said, like, you could really lean into being very over the top with this and dramatize the heck out of it, but he didn't have to, and it comes across very well because of that. I think it is really heartbreaking to see what these people are going through, and things are effectively getting worse, and yet they're increasingly being told just to sort of wait it out, even though this has been actively ongoing for months, as far as it being blown wide open and them knowing something is horribly wrong in their literal backyards. So it's just a really heartbreaking story. Okay, we are June 27th, and I finished Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien. This was a great book. So I think this is very important and compelling to read. You can really see his influence. He's got a background with like NPR and This American Life, where he has that very balanced, almost understated way of telling the story, but yet it's still very compelling and you want to keep going in the story, even though it's very, very mild-mannered as far as the voice of the story. But it is so compelling because you are watching these people who really just want help, and you get behind the individuals that are trying to fight for themselves, for their children, for their families, for their well-being. And they don't necessarily have all the tools. And watching them struggle, their desperate search for the people who do have the help, the knowledge, the expertise, and political power to help them is so great. I think that I could put this in just about anyone's hands and they would have a good experience reading this book because it is so page-turning. It's a bit like a corporate true crime. It's got that aspect. And, you know, being so far away from when this happened, but also seeing so many things happening environmentally and with corporate corruption, now it feels like we haven't come very far at all. I do feel so much, I guess, you know, personal weight from this because we have a similar sort of controversy near me that is constantly coming up every couple of years and fighting with the EPA to deal with this sort of landfill situation that also has chemicals. And there is a big controversy about that, and kind of documentary has been made about it in the past. And so knowing some of that stuff from my own personal area that I've only lived in as an adult, and seeing that there are people who live here and had their lives as children impacted by it and saw friends get sick because of it is really scary. And to see how it played out through this story and how little people cared about it, I can see echoes of that in the kind of experiences secondhand that I've had talking to people who grew up there. So yeah, really interesting stuff. I do think the one maybe knock on this that I would give it is that I actually wanted more when it ended. We kind of are just at the epilogue. Oddly, this has an epilogue. I'm not used to nonfiction having that. But I get to the epilogue and it's just getting into the really major movements and looking at this starting to be cleaned up. And I kind of wanted more. I wanted more on the background of the Superfund and what was decided and how it works and all of that. I would have loved to see the sort of national conversation expanded out quite a bit. So overall, this was super fantastic. I really thought this was great. So I think now I'm not going to read. I'm not going to pick up any more books for tonight. The new season of The Bear, the second season, came out on FX. I watched it on Hulu. And I've been slowly rationing it over the past week because it just came out last weekend. It's so good. So good. I'm not going to talk about any of the plot, but I will say there is an episode with a major ensemble cast of sort of cameo characters, or not even cameo characters, like secondary characters, because some of them do show up elsewhere in episodes, but like they blew out the stops with the casting on those secondary characters. And like, it's wild. This is a major star-studded, like, great performances. So this is probably one of my new favorite shows. However, it gives me anxiety the whole time. So if you've not seen The Bear, it's about a struggling small restaurant in Chicago, I want to say, somewhere northern Midwest, I think. And it's so stressful because they are just arguing all the time and just smoking all the time because they're under all this stress and just trying to keep things afloat. is a constant daily struggle. And watching them go through that, the performances through this whole series have been unbelievable. But this season is even better than the first, in my opinion. And like the cast that they got for these side characters is just amazing. Totally blew me away. So I've only got 2 episodes left, so I'm gonna watch those tonight and get cozy and relax and shut my brain off for a little bit.